Programs are not the least intrusive means available to such agencies. Now, I've seen little public discussion of Russia's own involvement in the policies of mass surveillance. So I'd like to ask you, does Russia intercept, store, or analyze in any way the communications of millions of individuals? And do you believe that simply increasing the effectiveness of intelligence or law enforcement investigations can justify placing societies rather than subjects under surveillance? Thank you.
Владимир, я думаю, что
Okay, so Mr. Putin, I guess you understand the question overall. We have seen you talk to world leaders and Mr. Snowden as well. I will try to translate.
The American version of English is a little different from the kind of English I'm used to. He was asking about surveillance over online activity on the internet.
So, yeah, he was interested whether Russia collects any kind of personal information of the users, and the US judiciary has said that this method of wiretapping is not effective, efficient enough to fight terrorism. And he also said something about intervention into privacy. Snowden has said that he did observe and monitor the debate about on this issue in Russia, and he asked you whether Russia is interested and has ever been involved in intercepting the calls of millions of people, of ordinary citizens, and whether you believe it is justified action, whether you think it's fair to introduce this kind of mass control.
Mr. Snowden, you are a former agent, a spy. I used to be working for an intelligence service. We are going to talk one professional language. First of all, our intelligence efforts are strictly regulated by our law. So how special forces can use this kind of special equipment as they intercept phone calls or follow someone online, and you have to get a court permission to stalk a particular person. We don't have a mass system of such interception, and according to our law, with our law, it cannot exist. Of course, we know that criminals and terrorists use technology for their criminal acts, and of course, special services have to use technical means to respond to their crimes, and including those of terrorist nature. Of course, we do some efforts like that, but we do not have a mass-scale, uncontrollable efforts like that. I hope we won't do that, and we don't have as much money as they have in the States, and we don't have these technical devices that they have in the States. Our special services, thanks God, are strictly controlled by the society and by the law, and are regulated by the law.
a reference to Stepan Bandera, the leader of the Ukrainian nationalist movement which fought for Ukrainian independence at the end of World War II, and opposed the pro-Slavic People's Republic of Donetsk. The interim government has decided that all citizens of Jewish descent over 16 years of age and residing within the Republic's territory are required to report to the Commissioner for Nationalities in the Donetsk Regional Administration Building and register.
This is a Fox News alert. Jews in one eastern Ukraine city are reportedly bebeing ordered to register with pro-Russian separatists. Masked men reportedly giving out notices to Jews leaving synagogue on Passover. The flyers telling the Jews to register and pay a special fee or risk being deported and having their property confiscated. Now, the pro-Russian group behind it denies that they had anything to do with the flyers, and it says it is really pro-Ukrainian groups putting out that propaganda. Former UN Ambassador John Bolton joined us. Good evening, sir. And when we saw this news, it just sent shivers up everybody's spine. Your thought?
No, absolutely. Look, we don't know exactly who's responsible. My guess is it's pro-Russian elements, maybe these uniformed militiamen who may well be from Russia itself. But the fact they would put the Jewish question on the table like this shows that there's enormous trouble ahead in Ukraine. Whatever the outcome over the next few days, whatever the outcome of the agreement negotiated in Geneva today, racial incitement, it's guaranteeing that the temperature is going to continue to rise.
Well, I think probably most Americans feel, it's like never again, when they see something like this. I mean, that does change the dynamics if it turns out to be more than just sort of a rogue group with something that blows over. But, this is such an important issue, to Americans. What should the president say or do or think or what when he hears this?
Well, I think Secretary Kerry has already condemned it, and that's fine. But that's of a piece with the problem with the entire Obama administration policy in Ukraine, it's essentially all rhetoric. You know, we had echoes of 1938 already with the Russian movement of armed troops across an international border, annexing part of another country, the Crimea. And today in Geneva, again, to come back to this statement that was issued by the U.S., the EU, Russia, and Ukraine, no mention of the Crimea at all. That's a done deal now, apparently, from the point of view of the West. I think Putin understands that. I think it emboldens him to make more demands from the government of Ukraine.
As the world's attention turns to events in Eastern Europe, rising tensions between the world's nuclear superpowers is once again raising the specter of the Cold War. And just as in the Cold War, this conflict too brings with it the prospect of nuclear warfare. This is the GRTV Backgrounder on Global Research TV. Welcome. This is James Corbett of CorbettReport.com reporting for Global Research TV in downtown Hiroshima, Japan, in the Peace Memorial Park in front of the A-bomb dome that marks the hypocenter of the blast that tore through this city 69 years ago, claiming tens of thousands of lives in the blink of an eye, and tens of thousands of more through the ravages of radiation poisoning in the days, weeks, months, and years that followed. The Peace Park is a place of prayer and vigil, a place for quiet contemplation of the horrors of nuclear warfare. The silence punctuated only by the peals of the peace bell rung by those wishing for the abolition of nuclear warfare. But now, despite the best wishes of those here in the Peace Park and countless others around the world, the specter of nuclear warfare once again hangs over the globe. Last month's nuclear summit at The Hague saw the usual politicians spouting the usual platitudes about the need to reduce the threat of nuclear warfare.
And at this particular summit, we've seen such steps as Belgium and Italy completing the removal of their excess supplies of highly enriched uranium and plutonium so that those supplies can be eliminated. In a major commitment, Japan announced that it will work with the United States to eliminate hundreds of kilograms of weapons-usable nuclear material from one of their experimental reactors, which would be enough for a dozen nuclear weapons. Dozens of other nations have agreed to take specific steps towards improving nuclear security in their own countries and to support global efforts.
But this was far from your average nuclear security summit. Tensions in Ukraine between Russia and the NATO powers provided a dramatic subtext to the meeting, with the G7 powers meeting behind the scenes to expel Russia from the G8 and make the boldest steps yet in what is already being dubbed the new Cold War. And just as in the original Cold War, the threat of nuclear warfare between the great powers is the unspoken fear raised by the conflict. In line with the rising geopolitical friction, stories have begun to emerge that both sides have heightened their levels of nuclear readiness. NATO, for its part, has continued build-up of its European missile shield. In February, the USS Donald Cook arrived at port in Rota, Spain to begin its deployment as part of the so-called Ballistic Missile Defense Plan. It is the first of 4 advanced destroyers that the US is deploying as part of the shield, which they say is aimed at defending the continent from the theoretical future threat of a theoretically nuclear-armed Iran. That these destroyers, and NATO's missile shield in general, is being deployed to counter a threat from Iran is not believed outside of narrow, America-centric propagandistic circles, however.
Довод НАТО таков. Ракетный щит возводится не против вас, а против Ирана.
In truth, the term missile defense is a misnomer, as it is a universally acknowledged tenet of nuclear warfare doctrine that advanced missile defense systems are integral to escalation dominance, or the ability to engage in warfare at any level of violence, including nuclear warfare. And the threat that NATO envisions does not come from Iran, a nation that has never been shown to be pursuing nuclear weapons, let alone actually possessing them, but Russia, still the world's second nuclear superpower.